Hello, and thank you for joining the program. My name is Sam Ankerson. I'm the director of the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum and Aquarium, and we're delighted that our speaker, Gabriel Jensen, is Zooming with us. I was going to say tonight, but wherever you are, it may not be evening, and very glad that all of you have joined. Thank you very, very much. You're going to see some really incredible pictures in Gabe's presentation. As you know, he's a terrific photographer, and there's also we're just especially excited about this talk. Just this idea of seasons below the surface is something that maybe we don't think about as readily as we do as the changing of the seasons that we see as we're walking around. But of course, the seasons mean different things um, underwater and for the mollusks and marine life that live there. I'll say hi, Gabe. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Good. I'll say too, we're got to know Gabe initially through his involvement in a new exhibition that is on view at the museum now called Nudibranch, Brilliant Colors of the Sea, Nudibranchs and Their Relatives. These are dazzling photographs, underwater photographs of nudibranchs. And if you have a chance to visit the museum in the coming months, this exhibit will be up at least into the early part of 2026. But if you have a chance to come visit, it is terrific. Features the work of two photographers, Gabe, and also Scott Johnson. So we first got to know him, and then which led to a conversation about this talk. So quickly, for this our kind of our off-season Zoom series, we have two more on the calendar, and I'll just briefly mention them. One is Thursday, September 18th, and it is the title of that is "What Can Oysters Tell Us About the Restoration of the Everglades?" And that's with Dr. Stephen Geiger of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And then on Thursday, October 16th, Gulf Seafood, Sustaining Wildlife, and Our Way of Life. And that's with John Fallon, who is the Director of Sustainability at the Audubon Nature Institute in New Orleans. So both of those, as this one is, are free. And you can go to the museum's website, shellmuseum.org, and register for those. And um, would like to thank the sponsors of our Zoom series this summer and fall. The support for the series is from the Sam and Frances Bailey Clean Water Education Center here at the museum, and also made possible by a grant from the Glenn um, W. Bailey Foundation. This lecture will be recorded and will be available. It usually takes us 3 or 4 days to get there with it, but it will be available on the museum's website on its lectures page, where there's an archive of all past recorded lectures. So if you ever want to access it, see it again, send it to somebody, it will be there. The last item of business, I guess. We're in Zoom webinar format for this program, and we will be doing Q&A after Gabe's presentation. But you feel free, please, to ask your questions at any time during the presentation. The way you do that is to use the chat function. So you take your cursor and roll that either along the bottom of your screen or the top. Click on chat and type in your question, and we will keep track of those. And after the presentation, we'll get to those one by one. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce Gabe, who is a photographer, really good photographer, biochemist, probably a really good biochemist as well, and photo-naturalist, whose images of underwater microfauna have been featured in many outlets and publications. Just a couple include NOAA, the BBC, Smithsonian Magazine, and National Geographic, among many others. And with that, I will exit the E stage here and hand it over to Gabe. And thank you all for being here. And I guess I'll stop sharing this, right? That's what we're gonna do, Gabe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll share mine now.
Okay.
To share, play. All right, Sam, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Perfect. How's it going, everybody? My name is Gabriel Jensen, and thank you so much for joining me tonight to talk about one of my favorite things, which is being underwater. And so tonight I'll be taking you beneath the surface of South Florida to explore a story that isn't really often told, and that's that our ocean has seasons, just as the land changes with spring blooms and autumn leaves, the sea around us shifts as well. Different animals appear, behaviors unfold, and whole communities rise and fall with the turning of the year. So, throughout this talk, I want to share how those cycles shape the lives of our biggest and our smallest marine creatures. So, all the way from nudibranchs, sea slugs, sharks, manatees, and other, of our small underwater neighbors. And so, I just kind of want to reveal to you guys that the ocean is a living, breathing system in motion. So who am I and why am I here talking about nudibranchs and the seasonal sea? Well, I'm an award-winning and published underwater photographer. I am the current underwater close-up photographer of the year, and my images have been featured in places from BBC Wild, Nat Geo, Forbes, to all sorts of places. But titles aside, I am also a dive guide, and I like to say a semi-pro critter spotter, and also a weekend warrior that spends way too many hours chasing slugs with a camera. And yes, I am a self-proclaimed nudie nerd. Um, what really drives me is connecting people with ocean's smallest and most colorful characters, and the one that most divers swim right over. I serve on the board of the South Florida Underwater Photography Society, and I like to connect photographers to explorers and scientists so that they can have some mentorship and grow their craft. So these are the tools of the trade. And before we get into the seasons themselves, I want to give you a little context on how these images are made because one of the first questions I always get, and I'm sure I can see some in the chat right now, is what kind of camera do you use? So this is my setup, or rather, this is my wife holding my setup because with all the float arms and lights, it looks less like a camera and more like an underwater spaceship. It's a Sony a7R III in a Nauticam housing, and everything that's very small in this presentation I've imaged with a 90mm macro lens, and everything big in this presentation I use something called the Canon 8-15 fisheye. And why does that matter? Because in this talk you're going to see everything from plankton the size of a grain of rice to groupers bigger than me. Capturing that full range of life requires different tools, a little adventure, and a lot of patience. And none of it would happen without the help and support of my wife and dive buddies who keep me safe, sane, while I hover with a camera for way too long in the same spot. So with that context, let's dive into how South Florida's seas change through the seasons. When we think of the ocean here in South Florida, it's easy to imagine it as a place that never really changes. It's always warm, always blue, but if we look closely at the water temperature over the course of a year, a very different story emerges. Just like on land, the sea has its own seasons. Temperatures rise and fall, currents shifts, and with those changes, the entire community of animals responds. That's the framework I'll be using for this presentation to take you through the 4 seasons underwater. We'll start in winter, when cooler water brings in some of the largest animals we see all year. Then we'll move into the spring when reproduction's at its peak, summer when life crowds the reefs, and fall when smaller but no less fascinating creatures flourish. By breaking the year into seasons, I want to show how the ocean here is anything but static. It's alive with cycles, migrations, and moments that come and go. So each season has its own signature cast of characters, and together they make up the rhythm of our coastal seas. And on the slide, we can see a graph that has kind of our sea surface temperatures here. I'm local to Fort Lauderdale, so this is my Fort Lauderdale buoy where I get all my information from. And behind you can see one of my favorite dive buddies, Joy, who's back there while I take a picture of a seahorse with her. So let's begin with winter. Unlike land, where winter brings snow and dormancy, the ocean remains alive with movement. Cooler water temperatures trigger massive migrations, shifting the balance of marine life. Winter marks the arrival of top predators, the clearing of plankton-filled waters, and important behavioral adaptations for fish and invertebrates. So let's explore what happens when South Florida waters begin to cool. And this is a beautiful over-under image of a sunset and a lemon shark here in the depths of winter. It was maybe 40 degrees that day in the air. When winter arrives in South Florida, the ocean changes in ways that you can really feel. So the water temperature drops to about 72 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit as cold fronts stir up and mix the surface layers. That cooler water is denser and holds more oxygen, which is a real boost for fish and invertebrates. It also clears things up. Visibility often during improves during the winter time, and that makes dives on our shipwrecks, like this one here called Julie's Wreck, especially spectacular. Uh, the most dramatic effect is what happens on a larger scale. As waters farther north cool down, many species make their way south into our backyard. Sharks, groupers, and other big migratory animals move in with the season, turning our reefs and wrecks into a gathering ground for giants. Manatees are one of the classic symbols of winter in Florida. As the water temperature drops, they gather in warm water refuges, especially our natural springs. These springs flow at a constant temperature year-round, creating safe havens when the ocean and rivers turn too cold for manatees to survive. And although manatees are very large, they don't have the blubber to insulate them. They are pure muscle and therefore need warmer waters. And that's why I identify myself as a manatee. I'm just big boned. With so much coastal development in South Florida, manatees have also rely on artificial warm water outflows, like this power plant discharge. It's a strange sight seeing dozens of manatees packed into industrial canals for warmth. This image here is taken at the FPL plant in Lake Worth Lagoon, but I'm also a big fan, and one of the starts of my ocean journey was seeing the manatees and baby bull sharks jump at the warm water outflow at Tampa Electric Company's Big Bend power plant in Tampa Bay. This image, which I call Big Baby, shows a Florida manatee calf nursing from its mother in the crystal clear waters of a spring. It's a tender moment, but also a reminder of the challenges these animals face. The springs provide critical warmth in winter, but they don't provide the seagrass that mothers need to feed. That means manatees must leave their refuges and make risky trips into colder waters to eat. For young calves with almost no body fat, that journey can be deadly. So while manatees are icons of Florida's winter, they are also a species caught in a delicate balance between survival in the short term and the resources they need to endure in the long term. Now on to the nudies. This is Pluckomophorus lucayensis, and I want you to say all of that 3 times fast. This is one of South Florida's most distinctive nudibranchs, and instead of coral reefs, you'll often find it in a very different kind of habitat. It lives in the rubble fields of our canals and on the pilings under bridges where colonies of silver feather bryozoans grow, and they only live on those silver feather bryozoans. These delicate branching animals provide both food and shelter, and when you take a closer look, you can sometimes even notice a faint bioluminescence whenever the bryozoans are touched. It comes from the backs of these nudibranchs. I'm still trying to figure out a way how to photograph that. This nudibranch's fiery orange body, dotted with little white specks and a crown with purple tips, little papillae, which is its little beard right there. It kind of looks like it's lit from within, and paired with its unusual home of these shadowy man-made waterways. So, like, I have to dive in canals typically to see this thing. Um, it's a good reminder that marine life doesn't always just thrive in pristine reefs. And these urban South Florida waterways have underwater neighbors all their own that are our neighbors too. This nudibranch, which I believe the print is up in the museum, this is Coryphella verta. And what you're seeing here is a very cool behavior. It's inflating its oral skirt. It's kind of like puffing out big old Botox lips, so it can safely envelop and feed on a stinging hydroid. And hydroids may look delicate, but they're armed with the same kind of stinging cells or nematocysts as jellyfish. Most animals avoid them, but nudibranchs like this one have adapted to eat them. In fact, they can even steal the stinging cells and store them in their own bodies as defense. Winter is a great time to spot them because cooler waters bring clearer conditions on the reefs and make delicate animals like hydroids and their predators easier to spot. It's a reminder that even in the season of giants, some of the most fascinating dramas are happening at a small scale. Um, as uh, as spring progresses, as winter progresses into spring, sharks begin moving south along Florida's coast. So blacktip, sandbar, and spinner sharks start arriving, replacing summer's larger pelagic sharks. So this includes like sandbars and bull sharks, and the major aggregation sites are kind of off Jupiter and West Palm Beach. And this is an image of a sandbar shark. You can see a lot of the sharks here have a fishing gear on their faces because they get caught by anglers so often. Uh, Lemon sharks are one of the very few species that display friendship between each other. So they will, like pups, will grow up in the same year in mangroves, and they scientists are able to catch them close to each other year after year. And so uh, between December to March is like the best time to go and see like a whole bunch of lemon sharks. And you can see we really get them uh, sometimes 20, 30 at a time swirling around the bait crate. Scientists are still studying kind of what they're doing when they aggregate because they definitely display a lot of social behaviors, and there's definitely like a little bit of mating that people capture on camera. And it doesn't really seem to be based off of feeding. But the sharks of South Florida are definitely one of my favorite visitors in wintertime. Moving on to spring, I have an image here. This is part of my Simplified Seas series where I go to extreme lengths to bring a white background with me underwater, and I'm able to image the animals without moving them, touching them, or disturbing them, kind of in this almost studio atmosphere at depth. So this is an image of a mating pair of seahorses. Uh, Spring on South Florida's reefs is truly a season of new life. As the waters warm into the mid 70s and low 80s, activity across the reef explodes. Plankton blooms fuel the food web, and suddenly the ocean is full of juveniles, fish, invertebrates, and even young turtles finding their place in the season's abundance. It's also the time of year when many species begin mating and spawning, taking advantage of the favorable conditions to set the stage for the next generation. And just offshore, the Gulf Stream edges closer and closer to land, coming closest to land around April and May, carrying with it larvae, nutrients, and tropical waters that add to this sense of renewal. Everywhere you look in spring, from the tiniest plankton to the largest turtles, the message is the same. This is a season built around beginnings. In the spring, something really exciting happens just offshore. The Gulf Stream shifts westward, pressing closer to Florida. And I know that you guys had my very good friends and mentors, Linda Ianello and Susan Mears, that talked about Blackwater, but it's also one of my favorite things, so I'm just going to touch on it. Uh, this shift westward changes everything. Suddenly, we're getting warm tropical waters pouring in from the Caribbean, carrying with them the larvae and plankton from all across the region. The Gulf Stream is like a highway of marine life. It delivers diversity right to our doorstep. Fish larvae, crabs, squid, jellyfish, and even deep sea oddities that normally would be far, far away. For the reefs, that infusion of new life enhances biodiversity, adding to the seasonal richness we see every spring. And for me, this is the best time of year to do blackwater diving. These are dives done at night, drifting the open ocean, where the Gulf Stream sweeps past and all those little pelagic creatures and planktonic creatures rise up from the depths. It's like being in the middle of a living galaxy. Glowing, delicate animals drift past in every single direction. Uh, Blackwater gives us a glimpse into of the ocean at its most dynamic and mysterious. These tiny drifting creatures may not look like much at first, but they're the foundation of the entire ecosystem. They are the beginning of every food chain and the first chapter of the story of the seasonal seas. And every spring, thanks to the Gulf Stream, we get front row seats to the show. So one of the most thrilling things about blackwater diving is that you get to encounter some rarities. Larval mollusks drifting in the current. This little one is an Atlantic long-arm octopus. It's a species that spends its early life out in the plankton before settling to the seafloor. And sometimes Blackwater throws in a creature that's just comedy. This is my favorite. It's a larval pancake batfish. And if you look closely, its flattened body and wide set eyes, it makes it look kind of like a living emoji drifting in the dark. They really are fun to see and about the size of a thumbnail. They migrate to the surface during the spring's blood moon and hover awkwardly, kind of flipping their fins in the water column as if they don't quite belong there. And in fact, they don't. As an adult, they live almost entirely on the seabed. But that's exactly the kind of surprise that makes these dives so addictive. Next, this is a diamond squid named for that brilliant light reflecting organs. The its chromatophores scattered across its body. These organs aren't just for show. They help camouflage the squid in the open ocean by breaking up its outline with flashes of light. It's a strategy called counter illumination. So they have not only chromatophores that change color, but they have these other types of cells that will reflect light. And so this one does not migrate vertically, so it doesn't go deep during the day. It will just spend its time in the open seas where being transparent or being reflective can be very helpful. Besides that is a female paper nautilus, and this being the Shell Museum, I know some of you, that's your holy grail thing to find, which is a nautilus shell on our beaches, and you can find them because we have the nautilus right here. Uh, what looks like a delicate shell on its back is actually a layer of mucus. It's a brood chamber used to protect her eggs, and so only the females will build this shell. And these Argonauts are like the only cephalopods that make this shell. Males, they don't build them. I see the males all the time. They just glom onto everything. They never get much larger than a thumbnail. But the females are quite amazing. I love their little parrot beaks. Next, I have a juvenile blanket octopus. I love blanket octopuses. What makes this one extraordinary is that each one of its suckers in the back is holding a fragment of a siphonophore that it's torn apart. It uses the nematocysts or the stinging cells from the siphonophore, which is, stuff like man o' wars is a siphonophore, and it'll tear it off and wield it like a little knife fight. It has all these stinging cells that it holds on to that it doesn't get, it knows how not to get stung. And so if you were to touch this blanket octopus, it would really sting and they will swing them at you. Um, so the nematocysts and the stinging cells are still active, and so whenever like one ejects, they'll like go find another jellyfish and tear it apart and use its stingers. So it's a super ingenious survival strategy, and I think we all know how smart these kind of octopus can be. Right next to it is a longfin inshore squid. Uh, Unlike the blanket octopus that most of us have never seen as an adult, I've never seen an adult. This is one that I think a lot of us know, whether we realize it or not. So this is one of our more economically important species in the region. It's and important to squid fisheries. So this is like the one of the main squid for Atlantic calamari is this Doryteuthis pili, and you can see it's like classic squid. In the springtime, fish tend to uh, have their spawning and mating in the spring, and they will line it up with the various full moons in spring, which all have fun names like blood moon or blue moon, everything. Um, this image is spawning indigo hamlets, and what's fun about the indigo hamlets is that they will take turns being like they are hermaphrodites. And 1 minute, one will be the girl and one will be the male, and then they'll swim up and fertilize each other, and then they'll switch places, and then and then he'll turn into the woman, and she'll be the male, and then they'll go mate again, and then a third one will come in, and then they'll have to decide who's going to be the dude. It's, it's a lot of drama, and it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. Sorry, mom. Uh, these fish kind of fight it out. Uh, in our region, we got mutton snappers, groupers, and parrotfish, and they all reproduce on these spring lunar cycles. These are lancer dragonets, and in the spring, the males put on a jousting display to compete with the females. They flare their fins kind of like banners, and they charge at each other in short bursts. It looks almost like an underwater duel, and the winner earns the right to court a mate, turning these tiny fish into something of the most dramatic performers of the season. Each one is about 2 inches long, like these big bull ones. And so it's interesting to see them duke it out. And the winner is usually whichever one is about a millimeter longer or so. Uh, Frogfish also become more active in spring. This frogfish are special to my heart because a lot of people will fly to Indonesia or think that this is something that you can only find going way out into the Pacific in the middle of nowhere. But here in South Florida, we actually have one of the largest populations in the world of these hairy frogfish. And they they will find each other via smell. And so one will land and it'll be a good place to live, and then all of a sudden another two will pop up, and they have these and they're so well camouflaged with all these uh kind of cirri that grow on them. And the cirri are these fleshy nodules that look like plants. Uh and they are very difficult to see in the wild. One of the things that I'm most proud about is that I'm one of the few people that have captured these hairy frogfish actually doing their spawn, because they kind of do it at weird and specific times. And if anyone's taking notes, it's exactly 5 to 10 minutes after the lunar sunset, uh, the one day before the full moons in spring. All right, y'all got that? Okay. So when it's that specific day, the females will start blowing up like beach balls. And so they have their eggs in them all this time, but what they're actually making is something called a mucus raft. And the females will blow up. They can barely even walk. They blow up only the day before they're going to spawn. And that's kind of the trigger for these little males here. Then this picture reminds me of the classic image, Norman Rockwell image, American Gothic. with like the dour lady and the dour man. But in this case, this little guy is just waiting for his big mama to put out the eggs. And so he'll walk around kind of sniffing at her backside until that, 5 to 10 minutes after sunset. And this is the result. If you wait with red light, you'll see them he'll bounce her up like a beach ball because she's filled with essentially water and it's not much heavier. So he'll bounce her up like this, and that triggers her to release this mucus raft, which he'll then fertilize, and then it goes and drifts in the Gulf Stream. And these are some of the only images on planet Earth of this mucus raft. Uh, Next, I like to touch on the seahorses. Everyone loves seahorses. Spring is the season when many seahorses pair up. And what's fascinating is that many species form monogamous bonds of these seahorses. A male and female will often stay together through an entire breeding season. So there's still pairs of seahorses on my local dive site that we've been watching since probably May. Uh, and they'll stick around until they get kind of eaten or kicked off. Um, and one of the most delightful things that every single morning, like at sunrise, they'll perform like a little courtship dance, and they strengthen that kind of bond. So they'll release their tails, and they'll do a little dance around each other, kind of just to say, "Hey, how's it going?" My wife thinks it's cute. I think it's cute too. Spring is also the primary mating season for many of the octopus species in South Florida, including the Caribbean reef octopus and common octopus, brown stripe octopus. I think I counted more than 8 different species of octopus on our local reefs. The males transfer sperm to the females using one of their arms is kind of specialized, and it's like kind of a penis arm called a hexacotylis, where it can transfer, its genetic material to the female. The female then takes that genetic material and like stores it away, and then they can choose which of the guys they like the most and use that one to fertilize her eggs. Um, at this time of during springtime especially, there's so many octopus that are out and about at nighttime on the reef. I call it, it's like cats around a dumpster. They're like feral cats everywhere. Like you can't even look over like 2 feet without seeing another octopus. uh which goes into kind of the ultimate sacrifice of what these octopus do. So, octopus generally live a very short amount of time, and in this case, this is a Caribbean reef octopus, and they live maybe about 2 years tops. Octopus mothers make the ultimate sacrifice, devoting their final weeks to protecting their eggs. So, the females will use their siphons, which is like the little water jet that they have, to constantly aerate their eggs, keeping them free from debris and predators. They stop eating totally, and this can take weeks and weeks. So they won't eat for their last few weeks of their life, just sitting and protecting their eggs. After the eggs hatch, the tiny planktonic octopuses drift in the current for weeks before finding shelter in seagrass beds or reef. Um, they then the octopus moms and the dads kind of go into a form of senescence, which is kind of researchers think it's related to kind of dementia, where they just kind of go out and try and get themselves eaten. It's kind of creepy to see, but it's part of their life cycle. This is what baby octopus look like in their eggs. So I had the pleasure of visiting this mother octopus that a lot of local underwater photographers dubbed hashtag Octomom because everyone visited her every day. Uh, so these are Octomom's babies that she was raising, and I love being able to see them inside of their eggs. And this is when they're almost about ready to hatch. So in the previous image where you can see they have a yolk and they're face up, in this one they've consumed all the yolk and they're ready to hatch, and then they turn into this. Uh, we'll see them and we'll know they've hatched because we'll see them on the blackwater dives, all these baby octopus. And what's fun is that if you're in the right place at the right time, sometimes entire broods of baby octopus will suddenly find the reef while you're there and drop right on top of you. So that's one of my most favorite underwater happenings is I was actually scuba diving in Puerto Rico, which is my other home, and a whole colony of little octopus dropped right on top of my head on a night dive. In spring, when our reefs begin to wake up a new life, we sometimes see creatures that don't exactly belong here. This big nudibranch is Janulus CF flavoannulatus, and it's native to Indonesia. But population has managed to establish itself right here in Palm Beach County. What you're looking at is part of my Simplified Seas project, where I isolate marine life against pure white backgrounds. And the idea is to strip away the clutter of the reef and let the animal speak for itself. Every detail of its form and color on display. Finding this species here is a reminder of how connected our oceans are. Larvae can ride currents or sometimes hitch rides on boats in ballast waters, and before long we have a new neighbor. Whether it becomes a lasting part of our seasonal rhythm is still unfolding. But for now, it's an example of how Florida's seas are always in flux, mixing the familiar with the unexpected. This is Elysia ornata. It's a Sacoglacian slug, which are not nudibranchs, but I feel like nudies get all the credit, and Sacoglacian slugs are just as cool. It has one of the strangest survival strategies kind of in the ocean. Scientists have documented members of this genus literally dropping their entire body and crawling away. So that they'll cut their like own heads off with just their head. So the head can then survive on photosynthesis and, eating a little bit of whatever it can chew, powered by chloroplasts that they've stolen from algae. And over time, it can regenerate almost an entire new body. Uh, it's an almost unbelievable adaptation, an animal that can decapitate itself, keep going, and rebuild. And it's another reminder that spring, with its surge of algae and sunlight, fuels some of the most bizarre and fascinating life histories on our reef. This is Felimar juliae, and those vivid sapphire blues and golden stripes aren't just for decoration, they're a warning. Like many nudibranchs, this species uses aposematic coloration to advertise that it's toxic or distasteful. Instead of hiding from predators, it does the opposite. It makes itself as eye-catching as possible, almost like a neon flashing sign that says, "Don't even try it." In South Florida, these sea slugs become more noticeable in the warmer months when their prey, sponges, are more abundant. Each appearance is a reminder that the color in the ocean isn't always camouflage, sometimes it's a survival strategy. The plankton blooms in spring also provide ideal feeding conditions for manta rays. More mantas are spotted off South Florida in May, where they can be seen performing their signature barrel rolls as they filter feed than any other time of year. The stronger Gulf Stream currents in spring often bring open ocean mantas nice and close to shore. And the outer reefs and shipwrecks in Palm Beach County are one of the best places to see these manta rays. Uh, and this is an image that I took of a manta ray that I was able to pass off to my friends at the Marine Megafauna Foundation. Shout out, Jessica. And because I was able to image it, and we were able to enter it into the fingerprinting program where they're able to identify each individual manta ray, I was able to give this one a name. So naturally, I named this manta ray Nudibranch, and he's been spotted a couple more times since then. You can see Nudibranch here is quite large, at least 15 feet tip to tip, and it's quite striking when they float right over you. Moving on from spring, we're in summer now. Summer in South Florida's ocean is a season of energy. The water is at its warmest, pushing up into the high 80s, and that heat fuels a burst of life. Coral spawning events light up the reefs at night. Baitfish schools gather in huge numbers, and lobsters begin their seasonal migrations. But that same energy also has a sharper edge. Warm water fuels hurricanes and storms, which can reshape reefs overnight. Summer is when the ocean feels most alive, but also most unpredictable. It's a season of abundance and intensity, a time when everything from corals to crustaceans to currents is running at absolutely full speed. The image I have here for summer is this is a wonderful lobster. This is like everyone's favorite thing to talk about is they love to go and look at lobsters. Some people catch lobsters. I just like to look at them. And this one is one happily munching away on some algae on the reef. In summertime, coral spawning is probably the ocean's greatest nighttime event, and it just happened like last week. Uh, it occurs about 3 to 8 days after the full moon in August, and it's a mass synchronized spawning of stony corals. So in the Keys, all of the Acropora corals, like the staghorn and elkhorns, will spawn kind of. Some will start trickling on one day, and then it'll be a bigger trickle, and then they'll go all at once on the last day. It's really, really spectacular to see. They release these little gamete bundles that are both sperm and egg, and they only separate once they hit the surface. And it can be like an absolutely beautiful scene to see. It's like snowing underwater. It's very cosmic because it's always it's always a clear night, and so you have like the stars kind of going down in the ocean, and then there's bioluminescence, and then all these little eggs start floating around you. It's really special. Here is a close-up of what these gamete bundles look like. When I took this image, no one else had an image besides microscope technicians of these gamete bundles unseparated at this magnification. So I used the most powerful underwater magnifiers in the world to take this, and you can see one of them in the top here just starting to separate. In summertime, bait fish populations reach their peak, their absolute peak, and they form really dense schools. Warm waters increase their metabolism because many fish are cold-blooded, and it leads to a lot of rapid growth. These bait balls attract predators, leading to super epic underwater feeding events. This image here is a favorite for fishermen, but it shows two tarpon that will chase around schools of silversides. And it's said that a single tarpon can eat about 1 ton of bait fish in a season, and it burns it off just chasing around in this endless game of cat and mouse. Uh, I love these images. It shows what it can be like underwater. Sometimes the bait can be so thick that it blocks out light, and it becomes like almost nighttime underwater with how much biomass that we see. It's just like you're surrounded, and sharks and other fish will swim around and pick them off. Hurricanes are a double-edged sword for marine life. And so, positively, they break up heat waves and they prevent bleaching events. Negatively, the strong waves can break corals and shift sediments around. They can strip sand off beaches and deposit it on reefs. And a lot of sharks and large fish will move way offshore before hurricane, sensing pressure changes. And so I have a I have a graph here that shows some typical major hurricane tracks as they go our way here. I know our season is heating up just about right now. And on top is this is just an image, a slow shutter image of some sponges. And sponges are one of the things that can get damaged the most actually in hurricanes because something will come loose like Fort Lauderdale we bumped there's a bunch of tires that got dumped and they'll roll across whenever it's rough and then they'll knock over a bunch of sponges. Uh, in in true legendary fashion, after a tropical storm passes through, They can trigger something of a mass migration in lobsters. So lobsters will sense this drop in barometric pressure and begin moving before the storms arrive. And it's because they rely on these nooks and crannies in the reef that if they get forced out by sand pushing them in or they get trapped, they'll die. So they kind of keep moving. And the Bahamian fishermen have called this a lobster walk, and it's not recorded very well pretty much anywhere. But there was one day that I got in following, I think, was it Dorian or one of these other hurricanes that stayed offshore, uh, where I got in, and there was literally thousands of lobsters. It was like a waterfall of lobsters pouring over the reef, um, just falling over each other in every single hole. Like you couldn't even touch the floor without them trying to stab you. And what do you know is of course, that day had my camera set up to take pictures of tiny little nudibranchs, but this is the best I could do with these lobsters. In summer, the ocean doesn't just get warmer, it stratifies. A sharp thermocline forms with hot water sitting on the surface and cooler, denser water trapped below. That layer locks in a huge amount of heat energy. And that stored energy plays into two of the biggest seasonal forces in South Florida. It can feed hurricanes and summer storms, helping them build strength. And when that hot surface layer lingers too long, it can stress corals and tip them into bleaching events, like the one we saw in 2023. The thermocline isn't the only factor, but it's a powerful one. It's an invisible boundary that influences how summer unfolds beneath the surface. This is also something that, as a diver, we really don't like because it can be 95 degrees on the dive boat at the surface. And then as soon as you get down to depth, it'll be like 68 degrees, which is like even colder than our winter temperatures. And it's really, really uncomfortable. So I've come up from a few dives with nice, chilly feet that I could barely feel. This is Horseshoe Reef in Key Largo, where what you're looking at is the skeleton of what was once a massive elkhorn coral. Like that's a set of that's a stand of elkhorn coral the size of like a house or a trailer. Um, Elkhorn used to be one of the defining reef builders in the Caribbean and Florida Keys, creating structures so large they looked like underwater forests. But in the summer of 2023, when sea surface temperatures broke records, we saw one of the most severe bleaching events in Florida's history. Prolonged heat stress corals across the Keys and South Florida, and colonies like this one, they just didn't survive. What's left behind is impressive in scale, but also a stark reminder of what's been lost. Summer has always been the season of heat in South Florida seas, but now it's also the season when corals face their greatest risks. And while this is a sobering image, it's important because these dead structures still tell a story of resilience in the past, of crisis in the present, and of the urgency to protect what's left. Also in summer is sea turtle nesting season. Leatherbacks can start nesting as early as March, but right now we're just finishing the nesting of green sea turtles and loggerheads, uh, which then leads to them having a super high density of nests on our beaches. So this is a hawksbill turtle kind of at depth. Um, So peak hatching season is in July and goes till now. So right now we're seeing baby sea turtles drift around and I'll surf for some scuba dive and one will, hit you in the head. It looks like a wood chip. Um, so the when the sand is warm, it kind of determines the hatchling's gender. So warmer sand means more females. And the hatchlings really rely on that moonlight to find the ocean. Although here in South Florida we have so much light pollution, sometimes they hatch later and will actually uh, start running at sunrise, and then they'll use the sunrise as their cue on how to get into the ocean. This is a hot topic right now, but sargassum is one of those things most people in South Florida feel like they know, and usually not in a good way. In the summer, when the blooms peak, it washes up in huge amounts. It smells when it decomposes, and it can make the beaches pretty unpleasant. But out at sea, it's a completely different story. Sargassum is a floating seaweed that drifts in the currents, forming massive mats. Those mats are they shelter juvenile fish, crabs, shrimp, and even baby sea turtles. Entire little ecosystems form in them, and when currents carry the sargassum towards the Gulf Stream and our reefs, that productivity spills over into the larger food web. So even when it washes ashore, it's really not all that bad. The nutrients released as it breaks down actually help fertilize coastal dune systems. And the challenge is management, balancing the ecological benefits with the real impacts on beaches and tourism. So while it's easy to dislike when you're ankle deep of it in the sand, and trust me, it's not something I enjoy either, sargassum is something worth appreciating as a seasonal pulse of life that connects us to the wider Atlantic. Next. So sargassum's main source is the Sargasso Sea, which is this area right out here in the Atlantic. It's a gyre of calm water north of the Caribbean, and from there, the currents carry it west and south, funneling these huge mats into the Gulf Stream. And by the time it reaches South Florida, it's part of the global conveyor belt of drifting seaweed. This movement explains why we see such dramatic pulses of sargassum between the spring and fall. It's not just local growth, it's an entire ocean basin kind of dumping onto our beaches and, the beaches throughout the Caribbean. Sargassum acts as a floating nursery, sheltering juvenile fish, crabs, and shrimp, and even seahorses. Uh, Juvenile sea turtles often hide in these mats, and more than 100 species rely on the sargassum. So whenever I find a sargassum mat has this rich yellow color, that's how I know that it's like still alive. There's going to be I know I'm going to find nudibranchs in there. I'm going to find crabs, seahorses, all sorts of things. And this is some of the selection of life that you'll find floating in the sargassum mats. We have histro, which is the sargassum frogfish. It's like the top predator. We have siphonophores like this man-o-war, and we have the Nomudae kind of driftfish that live inside of its tentacles. This is a baby loggerhead right here. We have baby sportfish. So this is a mahi-mahi that's about an inch long, and they hunt in between the sargassum mats. So that's an economically important species that relies on the sargassum. And finally, these wonderful seahorses that hopefully find our way to our reefs before they have to swim away. But sometimes they just grow up in the open ocean and get eaten by the same mahi-mahis as they're growing up. In summer, we also have a time of large nudies. This is Felimar picta, and it's one of the largest nudibranchs we find in South Florida. They can grow up to 7 inches long, which for a nudibranch really does make them a giant. Their bright yellow and blue patterns look almost brushstroke, which is why they're sometimes called painted nudibranchs. Um, Seeing one of these in the middle of a dive is a bit of a shock. This one is about 7 inches long. So if you're looking for nudies that are like the size of a grain of rice, suddenly you have this big giant, this big giant guy crawling all over you. And finally, we'll move into fall, which is a season of movement. So water temperatures begin to cool again. This is a great relief for us and the corals. Tropical storm activity peaks, reshaping reefs and beaches. Those mass migrations of fish and predators are still going on. They're just moving in the opposite direction now. And we have Goliath grouper, mullet, and shark migrations coming through. And the king of all of these is the Goliath grouper aggregation. So every fall, these Goliath groupers form massive spawning aggregations, and these fish can weigh up to 800 pounds. They kind of gather at our shipwrecks, ledges, and artificial reefs, and they will boom and bark at each other in order to communicate, which for something the size of a VW Beetle is very impressive to see in person. uh, Shipwrecks, like this is the shipwreck of the Anna Cecilia, become the spawning grounds. And you can see the Goliaths are kind of using the natural eddy of the shipwreck to shelter themselves from the current. What'll happen is the big females will gather up near the front, and the little males will jockey around them in order to be whoever's closest to spawn. Uh, this time of year, actually, right now, this very week, going into next month is some of the best time of the year to go and see these huge, massive fish. So this is my friend Daniel here hanging out with the Goliath grouper. You see they're right in line. That fish is huge. And what's interesting enough is no one's ever kind of witnessed these or filmed these Goliath groupers spawning because they typically spawn at night and it's very deep dives. So it can be very dangerous and people have been trying for years to capture that. Counter to the Goliath groupers on the smaller side, we have these nudies. These are Lecheris evelinae. These are a delicate alid nudibranch that feeds on hydroids. What's interesting is that this species, like this, often becomes most abundant in early fall. That's when hydroid colonies are thriving the most, and the nudibranchs quickly take advantage of that surge in food. Populations can appear to spike almost overnight, with dozens of individuals suddenly visible where there was none a few weeks before or even like the day before. It's a good example of how nudibranchs act as a living barometer of the seasons. When the conditions are just right for their prey, their numbers absolutely peak. And for a brief window, you can encounter them in pairs like this, feeding, mating, and carrying on with their entire life cycle in a very narrow slice of time, sometimes just days. Here we have a pair of Phalimar juliae nudibranchs. You saw one earlier in the presentation. And they're doing exactly what defines most sea slugs, living directly on the very sponge they eat. In this case, it's a bright blue sponge, Heliclonus caerula. I think I said that right. And the nudibranch's colors even echo the palette of their prey. They get all that blue color. That's no coincidence. Many nudibranchs gain their chemical defenses from the sponges they consume. So these guys would not taste very good if you were to stick them in the air fryer. They turn their food literally into armor. This strategy is part of what makes nudibranchs so tied to place and season. Where the sponges grow, the nudibranchs follow. And when the sponges cycle through periods of growth and dieback, the nudibranch population rise and fall too. So many nudibranchs time their mating to the abundance of their food, ensuring the next generation hatches into a buffet that they can absolutely gorge on. So when we watch them feed, we're also seeing the rhythm of their entire life cycle, tightly bound to the sponge beneath them. And believe it or not, these guys will eat back the sponge a little bit until the sponge will fall off or disappear, and then we won't see them again. Um, until the next year. So these guys will only stick around for a couple of weeks. In the fall, it also unlocks some diving that I can't do other times of year. This little creature is Costacella ossifera, the eye spot Costacella. And I have to admit, it's my absolute favorite animal in this entire presentation. It might be only a few millimeters long, but it's carrying out one of the most extraordinary tricks in all of biology called kleptoplasty. That word means stealing plastids, which means they're stealing the chloroplast from their food. When this Saccoglassian slug feeds on algae, it doesn't just digest the plant cells. It keeps the chloroplasts, the little green organelles responsible for photosynthesis, alive in its own tissues. In other words, this animal can photosynthesize like a plant. It practically eats sunlight. In the fall, uh, I love them because bacteria levels can drop, which allows me to safely dive in the shallow Florida Keys crocodile lagoons where these guys thrive, where otherwise the bacteria loads would be too much and it's kind of not safe for humans to be in there. And I just love that they look like cartoon sheep, hence their most famous nickname, Shaun the Sheep, after the cartoon. Uh, when an animal blurs the line between kingdoms of life, to me, that's pure magic. This little slug is Ercolania fuscata. It's only about 4 millimeters long. It belongs to a special group called Sacoglacians, like the other ones. And here it's crawling across a bubble of sea grape algae. What makes it remarkable is its diet. This Sacoglacian pierces the algae's cell and it sucks out the contents like a little vampire, even though it has a cute little mouth part right here. Fall is a great time to see them because this is when patches of sea grape algae expand across the shallow reefs and seagrass beds, using all that energy from summer. If you slow down and look really closely, you can sometimes spot these miniature grazers glowing green against the algae, carrying out photosynthesis in a way that blurs the line between plant and animal. This is Flamidia benza, more charmingly known as the Harlequin sea goddess. It's a nudibranch that lives among rubble and shells in South Florida's tidal canals and nearshore reefs. Unlike some of the other slugs we've talked about for their wild adaptations, I really just wanted to include this one because it's super beautiful and super common. The bold colors and patterns are a classic example of aposematism, advertising that it's toxic and not worth eating. Fall is one of the most important recovery periods for corals after the stress of summer heat. As the water cools, the risk of bleaching drops, and corals begin to regain their symbiotic algae, the zooxanthellae that gives them both color and energy. At the same time, algae growth slows down, which gives reef grazers like parrotfish and tangs the chance to clean the reef surface. That helps corals hold their space and continue to grow. The season also brings clearer conditions with fewer storms and less sediment in the water. Corals can photosynthesize more efficiently and stay healthier. So while fall might seem quieter compared to the spawning or migrations of other seasons, for corals, it's a season of resilience and repair. This image, one of my interests is underwater fluorescence photography, which is where I will use specialized lights to excite the proteins in the flesh of some sea animals. And then what I do is I put a filter on my camera to filter out the light that I did use to excite it, and therefore I only capture the light that comes off of its proteins. In this case, I used a 450 nanometer kind of blue UV light in order to excite it, and I used a 740 nanometer yellow filter in order to filter it back out. And this is kind of the result. You get to see brilliant colors coming off of these corals. In this case, a grooved brain coral. Um, so fall reset. At this point, the reefs are kind of re-preparing for winter. Stuff starts like as the animals eat away the algae that grows in winter, it'll kind of die back, and that's reinforced by the cooling water temperatures. So at this point, juvenile reef fish are reaching their full size and they're like ready for the winter chill. What I hope you take away from tonight is that the ocean here isn't static. It's constantly shifting through its own seasons. By paying attention to those changes, we gain a better understanding of when animals arrive, when they reproduce, and how the whole system fits together. For divers, scientists, or even casual beachgoers, seasonal awareness helps us see patterns instead of snapshots. It turns isolated encounters into part of a larger story, and that awareness is what allows us to protect these systems more effectively. I love this image here of my friend Diana looking at hydroids. This is what it looks like underwater, and if you squint, you can see the red of a couple of nudibranchs hanging out. Of course, this underwater balance is delicate. The same seasonal rhythms that bring in sharks, groupers, and nudibranchs are also the rhythms that can tip corals into stress during hotter summers or that fuel storms when the ocean holds too much energy. South Florida's underwater world thrives on this push and pull. Abundance one season, scarcity the next. When those natural cycles get disrupted, whether by warming seas or human impacts, the entire rhythm can change. Recognizing that balance is the first step in keeping these seasonal seas alive for the future. Even with all these changes, one thing remains true: the ocean's rhythms continue. Each winter still brings giants, spring still fills the reefs with new life, summer still pulses with energy, and fall still reveals the hidden wonders of the small things. The seasons of the sea remind us that we're part of something bigger, a living system that shifts and renews itself year after year. If we pay attention, if we protect it, and if we keep experiencing that story, we can keep it alive season after season. So as you leave tonight, I hope you carry that with you. The knowledge that the ocean has its own calendar and that every dive, every tide, every shelling session, every season is part of that rhythm. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. And a good message for all of us. Thank you so much. And terrific presentation. I know there are some questions in here, and folks, if you'd like to ask questions, please type them in on the chat. I just had a quick question to get started. Like, how did you get started in this
So,
underwater photography?
yeah. Great. Can you see me now? Are we side by
Yeah,
side?
yeah, very
That's
good.
great. Well, I actually got started in underwater photography because I like taking pictures of mermaids. You know, there was in the Tampa Bay region, there's a strong culture of people that like to dress up as mermaids, and I thought that was really cool. So I bought a GoPro, and I want to take pictures of mermaids. But eventually, I really got into going out and fishing, and I love fish. And then when I moved over here to South Florida, I noticed that there was way less fish than on the West Coast, and I didn't want to be that guy competing for the same three fish that are left. And so I started taking pictures of the fish that I saw because I saw that it was something that I didn't feel like I was taking anything away from the environment.
Mhm. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, let's go to the chat room. All right, let's see. You touched on this a few times, but Linda is asking, can you tell us the approximate size of the nudibranchs?
Oh, yeah. So I like to relate them to food because everyone knows what food is. And most of the nudibranchs you see in this presentation are about the size of an M&M or smaller. Whereas the ones that I called big are about the size of a cocktail weenie or bigger.
All right, good analogies. Helen has a question. Do mating periods coincide with full moons and high tides?
I would absolutely say from from my perspective, yes. So when I'm looking for to capture those like kind of mating experiences, I'm going to be going at around a full moon. And it doesn't always mean at the peak full moon. A lot of animals will do their behavior exactly a couple days before or a couple days afterwards, but they usually will all sync up to do something around the same time. And they will do it kind of at high tide. It was great, good question.
Hmm, okay. Another Helen has a question. Do you photograph in the Gulf of Mexico slash Gulf of America slash Gulf?
Yes, I do go to the Gulf. Sometimes I have a whole set of pictures from Tampa Bay and those other regions. Most of the time the slugs are about the same, although the visibility in the Gulf, because it has a higher algae load, it doesn't kind of allow itself for like these nice grand blue pictures. So it's mostly macro images over there.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Another question. Do you have to take a lot of shots before you get the one you like? I bet the answer is yeah.
It's it's funny you ask that because that's currently a discussion point in the underwater photo community. Some people are spraying prayers, so they'll take a bunch of images, wait for the right thing, and other people are snipers. And I gotta say, sometimes I'm one, sometimes I'm the other. So if I'm looking for a behavior image, um, I'm not just constantly taking pictures, but when I hold down that shutter button, it'll take like boom, 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 like five at a like really quickly. Well, when I know it's at the very peak of the action, and hopefully one's in focus. Um, but for something like nudibranchs, I really only need to take usually between three or four pictures, and then I can move on because they're also reactive to light. So if you flash it too many times, they'll start to turn away from you.
Hmm.
And so you don't want to disturb them too much, or if they start, they start not looking as like pretty because they're hiding from you.
How many days a year, roughly, do you think you're out there photographing?
Oh, my in 2023, I had a very slow summer at work, so I ended up with 374 hours underwater. And
Wow.
this year I'm currently on track with about 127. So I'm a little bit behind, but I mostly track hours because I'll do dives can be 3 or 4 hours at a time, or like three, four
Mm,
hours long each.
mm, okay. Question from Rosabelle. Do you know what time of the year the manatees come to Destin?
I would imagine that they follow the same patterns that they do in the other ones. So uh they're waiting for those very first cold fronts that come through, and they as soon as the water temperature in the Gulf gets lower than 72 degrees, they are making a beeline to the springs. And I know that you guys have some springs in that area, although that's a part of Florida I don't go to too often.
Okay, question. Would different regions in the Atlantic have these seasons but with different animals? For example, would the Arctic have fewer seasons?
You know, that's a great question, and I'm just a photographer that does these ones. I would say, and I'm a photographer that dives here in Florida. Um, I do know that seasonality in the ocean is way more pronounced up in temperate waters, where there'll be much more massive changes, kind of in like algae life, like entire kelp forests will come and go, and or there'll be ice pack on top. So I know that seasonality kind of can exist in some way, but I'm not intimately familiar with it.
Not just a photographer, you're a very good photographer. All right. Do mollusks with shells shift with the seasons?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. I didn't include a lot in this one because, I think nudibranchs are prettier. Sorry. Um, but yes, they absolutely do. So you'll get some at some times a year and some at other times a year, and then you won't see them where else. I'm not much of a sheller myself, but I know that there's some shellers that probably know that you can find a shark eye at some time of year and a murex at a different time of year.
And Marcia asks, how do you find those tiny nudibranchs?
Oh, I can talk for hours on that, but essentially it comes down to memorizing the food that they live on. So it's difficult to find a a Felimar Julia that's the size of a cocktail weenie on a reef. But if you know that a basketball size blue sponge is where they like to live, all I have to do is swim from blue sponge to blue sponge, and eventually I'm going to find one with them on it. Same with hydroids. I know that I can go and see these. Uh, if I know where the hydroids are, I just have to check that hydroid. So I kind of know what I'm looking for before I look for it.
Yeah. All right, we'll take one more question. I think this is an appropriate one to end on. Do you have an online gallery of photos that can be viewed by the public? And do you post pictures on social media?
Oh, yes, I do. So actually, so my business name is Shallow Seas Gallery. I'm on shallowseasgallery.com or on Instagram as Shallow Seas Gallery. And that name comes from uh I kind of got started because it was all doom and gloom, like the reefs are kind of dying and all of that. And so I just wanted to show that there's life in between the cracks, like in the rubble, that it's still it's not, you don't want to write off, an environment just because it's no longer what you consider the peak. There's still value to be had. So that's Shallow Seas Gallery. That's the name of this whole project. And I would be happy if you could join me on it.
All right. Well, Gabriel, thank you very much for your time and this terrific presentation, and thank everyone for joining. And anyone who has the chance, please come visit the museum in the coming months to see the exhibition that includes Gabriel's photographs. They're beautiful. And yeah, thank you all again. And we'll see you next time. And all right, Gabe, have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Be
Thank you.
underwater.